All right, good morning, everybody. It's 10 o'clock, and we know what that means. It's time for another hour of fun. All right, only 50 minutes. 50 minutes of fun. A couple of announcements, as I am wont to do, make announcements. Remember the pizza thing, 21st.
Yeah, I can't come.
What? Why not?
It's the same night as one midnight.
Well, you just come early. Mm-hmm.
What time does one midnight start?
7:30. I start at 5.
Then I'll come.
All right. Yeah, I don't know what this big night, I don't know how anything could be bigger night than coming to my house, but if people want to think so.
You have to have people come pay respects to Lord Lululemon.
Yes, of course. All right, so anyway, Friday night, April the 21st, we will, oh,
Hello, Fair Helen.
well, hello.
Underdress. This fashion show.
What's that?
I'm underdressed.
I see that. Well, you know, I did tell you this was all about fashion today. As you can see, I'm a slave to fashion. Yes?
I have a question. What is the status on the honors society?
Okay, yes. These are all things we should bring up at our Herodotus meeting that we don't have.
Is that every other week?
What?
Is that every other week?
I think we haven't had one in about 3 or 4 weeks.
We only have one.
They keep canceling. I get an email saying, not this Monday, not this Monday, not this Monday. Well, maybe someday.
And not this week. And we will this coming Monday. Because that's what
Well, we have to have elections this coming Monday
okay.
because we'll never have another meeting.
Okay. Why are you talking to me about that?
I don't know.
Talk to him.
I'm just saying, I'm just making comments. I'm just saying, I've tried to talk to our officers, but
But what is that? Why? Okay. What's the status on the honors? That's what I'm asking.
I know. There is no update at this time. Yes, I would say, you know, they told me, and I thought about sending them an email, but, you know, they're very picky people, so I've refrained. But they told me not to expect to hear anything until like 4 to 6 weeks. It's now been,
Right, 6 weeks later.
it's just about 6 weeks now. Next week will be the 6th week. So,
So just in time. Just in time for the.
yeah, just in time. It's all, you know, I started this process last September, and they have been dragging it out. Because what happened is I applied. I went on their website in August. I started getting all the materials together. I sent it all in September because they said everything, you know, you could only apply 2 times a year, October 1st and March 1st. So I sent everything in. So about September, let's say 25th, after I'd sent everything in, I get a reply saying, thanks for sending everything in. It looks like you qualify, so we're now going to send you the application materials. So I was applying to apply. It doesn't say that on the website, but you have to apply to apply. So then they sent me all the stuff, and it had all this stuff I had to get done in like 5 days, which of course you're not going to get done in 5 days. So it got tabled for a while, and then I sent it in February. And then they sent me an email saying, well, we've received all your material. We'll forward it on to whoever. Don't expect to hear anything for 4 to 6 weeks. And that's the last communique that I received.
Okay. So we'll expect an answer in the next week.
Yes, I guess so. If I don't hear anything, let's say by Wednesday, I will send him an email and say, what's the status? But I think they enjoy this process. That's all I'll say about it. They enjoy it, I do not. But there's so many things in life that way. I can't make a list of the things that I don't enjoy that other people do. It would be too long. But, like just meetings in general. Evidently, somebody must like them. I hope somebody likes them, because we go to a lot of them. All right. Speaking of meetings, we're here. So yes, Phi Alpha Theta. Hopefully we'll find out next week. Herodotus, I guess we're meeting on Monday at 3 o'clock in the second floor of the other building over there, BV.
The Disney building.
BV2, probably 38, but I don't know the exact room. BV, they call it BVW, I guess. Why are you looking askance? She's like, yeah.
That was BVE.
BVE? Oh, yeah.
I've never heard of the last letter on it.
BVE, well, sometimes they do, because now they theoretically have BVW, which does have a couple classrooms in it. I teach a class over there. It's the other half of the building, which appears to be another building to most normal people, but they call it the same building. Yeah, it's got like a little ladder thing across between them, so it makes them the same building. So it's not two buildings. You might think of it as two buildings. The building that has the food and the building that doesn't have the food. That's the way I distinguish
So
it.
you teach. Okay, so here's the walkway.
Yes.
Here's on over here.
I teach, I now this semester I do not teach in the building where my office is. I teach in the building where the food is.
Oh, okay. With the spiral staircase.
Yes, which was a great group of the 1960s. Spiral Staircase, you ought to look them up.
Those stairs are really tiny.
I go up and down them, well, several times. I like it because they're loud, because that way it lets everybody know to get out of my way. I don't have any room for you to pass me on this stair. Speaking of noisy, my house has sounded like a World War II movie all week. We go outside, there's like, B-52 bombers, there's eight of them flying in formation, or yesterday, the Blue Angels were right over my house. I got out of my car, I look up, it's like, and they were like maybe 100 feet above my house, is what it seemed like. Maybe it's more than that. I could read everything on the planes. There's 4 of them in formation. Then they split off, and they did a couple of, here's more. We can hear them outside. They split off in like 2, and they zoomed around, and they came out from different angles and came in, and then all 4 of them got together, and they went straight up. And then all of a sudden they turned, they did a barrel roll, and they started going straight down. I mean, they went straight down till looked like they were going to hit the ground, and then they pulled up. My only comment was to my neighbor, I hope they keep them in the air. Because, they don't always. But anyway, it's very exciting here in Lakeland. We have what I like to call the air show. I don't know what other people call it. And we got lakes, we got gators, we got all kinds of stuff to kill you. Planes could drop on my house. Alligators could come into my living room. These are things that would have never happened to me in Kentucky. I never saw an alligator in Kentucky, I can tell you that much.
I saw a duck charge another duck.
In Kentucky? Oh, here, yes.
These SU ducks are vicious.
It ran like 30
What?
feet just to attack this other duck.
You got to watch out for the ducks. The ducks got to be tough around here because they got to fight off the gators.
They're vicious.
I think I met a duck the other day. His first name was Sid. Sid. Oh, there he is. Yeah, come on in.
What do you do here?
Sid Vicious. Where is Jamin? Where is everybody else?
Damon was late this morning.
But he was here. All right. Well, I suppose we better get started. We've had enough announcements, enough fun and games.
Ducks.
Ducks. I did see ducks walking the other day. I saw a mama, what I'm assuming is a mama duck. And I saw like maybe 6 little ducks, which I like to call ducklings. And they were walking right in between those 2 buildings that everybody says is one building on that sidewalk. They were walking right there, marching right through. Everybody got out of their way. They're marching. I assume going down to the lake. I don't know. They were headed towards the lake, but they were about underneath that little bridge.
The ducks are vicious and the squirrels will walk right up to you.
Squirrels are nice and the ducks are vicious.
Yep.
All right, I think we did this one last time is where we ended.
No.
No?
We left up on Palestine.
One day?
We did do this one.
Yes.
Okay.
We do that.
All right. All right, we ended up the conquest of Palestine by Big Al. And remember we talked about the causeway and how now the causeway has expanded into a much bigger area so that the island, what was once the island, is now a peninsula, the city of Tyre, which of course today is in modern Lebanon. Well, he's going to move on to Egypt. As he moves on to Egypt, he will have a battle at Gaza, which doesn't last very long. That's along the coast of Palestine. It's sort of the entranceway. Gaza's always been the entranceway to Egypt, in ancient times anyway, and I guess still sort of in modern times. Gaza is still on the border with modern-day Egypt. So then he enters Egypt. As he moves in, he finds little resistance. I think everybody's found out what he did at Tyre. They said, we know we're not as tough as Tyre, so we're not going to try to fight this guy. And as they move through, not only do they not fight him, they greet him with acclaim. He is named the divine son of Ra. He is declared, therefore, a new pharaoh of Egypt. And this seems to have an effect on Alexander. He kind of likes the idea that he is special, that in fact he's even divine. He likes entertaining that thought. And so he begins to now be, people bowing down before him. He kind of likes that too. He orders the construction along the coast of the Mediterranean of a great city that is named after him, Alexandria. There are, in fact, several cities named Alexandria, but this is the most famous. And it becomes the capital then of Egypt during the Hellenistic period, and becomes one of the main cities of the ancient world at that time. Certainly becomes very important in the Roman period, in the Christian period. Alexandria becomes the place where there are quarters of the city, and a couple of those 2/5 of the city is divided into Jewish sectors. A lot of Jews end up living here eventually. And this is the place where the Septuagint is written. What is the Septuagint? Anybody know? A Greek translation of the Old Testament. Just the Old Testament. Because it's actually translated prior to the New Testament. So it's done in, let's say, roughly 150 BC, 160 BC. It is a translation then, and what it shows is that Greek culture was so prevalent in the Roman world and in the East, and even within the Jewish community, that the Jewish leaders, the Jewish elders, felt compelled to order the translation of the Hebrew scriptures into Greek because Jews couldn't read Hebrew, but they could read Greek. The other thing it does for us is it provides us a snapshot, if you will, a look at the way Jews in the mid-2nd century viewed the Old Testament, because every translation is an interpretation. Got to keep that in mind. Every translation is an interpretation. So it becomes a very valuable tool to compare the Septuagint to the Hebrew text that we have to see how the Jews of, let's say, 150 BC were reading the Old Testament. You figure that out by their translation. Also, it's very important because it is often what is quoted in the New Testament when they're quoting the Old Testament. Sometimes you'll read in the New Testament, they'll quote something from the Old Testament, and you'll flip back because you're very studious people. You'll flip back in your Old Testament and look up the passage that's being referenced in the New Testament, and you will find differences. Now, not big differences, but you find differences. This is the reason why. The Old Testament, our Old Testament, has been translated into English, has been translated from Hebrew, and even some texts that were not available in the 2nd century BC to those who did the translation into Greek. Well, anyway, that's a discussion for a different class, I suppose. But it does fit here because we are talking about Hellenistic history and how it intersects with, the Bible, Jewish people, settlement. Anyway, Alexandria becomes the main city. It has the greatest library in the ancient world. It has access to papyrus. Papyrus, of course, is the plant that grows in Egypt. Tall reeds. Something like cattails, if you've seen cattails, you got those down here in Florida? No cat. You got them? Cattails, yeah. Something like or bamboo. Got to watch the bamboo; it'll go crazy. But it's that same kind of plant. It's long. It's sort of tubular, and papyrus has a triangular shaped stem that'll shoot up 10, 15 feet or more. You can then cut it, and then you split it lengthwise. So you decide how big you want your roll or your pieces to be. Let's say you want them to be 14 inches roughly. So you'd cut those in 14 inches pieces, then you'd slice it down, and you'd have several 14-inch pieces that way. Then you would soak that in water for a day or two. That would release the natural juices there. Then you would take it out and place it on a flat surface, and you would put the 14-inch strips vertically, and then you would put the 14-inch strips horizontally and vertically, and then you'd press it, put something on top of it, press it down with a weight, and the natural juices of the plant will stick it together, and you'll have a 14 by however big you make piece of paper. Our word for paper comes from the word papyrus. Okay? So, they had lots of papyrus, therefore they had lots of paper, had lots of writing material, which most people in the ancient world did not have.
Is there any of that around?
Papyrus? Oh yeah. Still grows in Egypt.
I mean, do we have any from...
Ancient? Oh, we got tons. There are tons of ancient papyri from Egypt, yes. We have letters, we have songs, we have shopping lists, we have business records. They're just, what's it look like? Well, it's kind of tan, it's got writing on it.
I mean, can you see like the grooves where
Oh yeah, you can see it. Well, I've got some modern papyri. I don't know if I think it's in my office. I should have brought it, that I could pass around and let you see it. But it's thin. It almost looks like paper, but it's kind of, it's not very bendable. It's meant to, not meant to sort of fold it over or something. If you start folding it over, you break it eventually, but it's meant to be flat. Now, you could eventually roll it if you put it together right, and you could sew it. What they would do is take pieces of it and then sew it together and then roll it up in a big roll with 2 sticks. 2 wooden pieces usually. And we call that a scroll. So scrolls were really the forms in which all of these books were done. They were not done in a book form. Book is a very specific example of how writing is put together, by the way. It's called a codex in Latin, C-O-D-E-X. A codex, then, you would take individual sheets of paper or papyrus or whatever the writing material is, and then you would put it together and then sew it on a spine. And then you'd bind that spine, so you'd have chunks. Usually they fold them over in 2 and then they sew between it. Okay? Those are called quires of the book. Now, that's not invented until much later, till the 2nd or 3rd century AD. 2nd century AD, you can find that. You don't find that in the 2nd century BC. 2nd century BC, everyone's using scrolls. You know why books were invented? They were invented by Christians because they wanted to do the very thing that I just said you probably did sometime. They look at something in the New Testament and they want to compare it to something in the Old Testament. Or they look at something that Paul wrote in Romans and they want to check it to something that Paul wrote in Galatians. To be able to do that, a book is very handy. You can just flip. You can put your finger in one side, put it there, and compare. All right? If you try to do that with a scroll, it takes a long time. In fact, there might be several different scrolls. You're going to have to find the right scroll. You're going to have to open up to the right thing, and then get the other one. You're going to need big tables to do it. But with a book, you just hold it in your hand, flip it back and forth very easily to compare things. And in fact, in book forms, what they even start to do in the Christian period is they start to put different translations on the same page or on the same 2 pages so you can compare them. So you could have the English and you could have the Greek, and you could have whatever. You have this translation and this one. Maybe you've seen people with Bibles like that say have 4 translations and they're all laid out together. That kind of thing, Christians again came up with that because they wanted to compare this Greek text with that Greek text of, say, the same book. So the book form is a very specific form. We kind of use it in general to mean anything that's written is a book. We just say, well, if it's long enough, it's a book. But it's actually a very specific thing. And all that begins really, a lot of it begins in Egypt, Alexandria, but later period, because it becomes a big center of Christian thought. But at this time, a huge library is built there. A huge lighthouse is there. One of the 7 wonders of the ancient world is the lighthouse at Alexandria. You can see where it is here on the map. And then he goes out to the oracle at Siwa. And I think, as we mentioned before, there are multiple oracles. There's an oracle at Delphi. There's an oracle at Didyma. There's another oracle down here at Siwa. So as Alexander is traveling, he's also a bit of a tourist. He's got a job to do. He's military leader. That's what he's doing. But along the way, hey, I'm here by Troy. I'm going to go take a look at Troy. I've never been there. Oh, I'm here in Egypt. How far am I from the oracle of Siwa? And he goes out there. And that's when basically he's declared the divine son of Ra. Then he cuts across the desert towards Memphis, where Elvis lives. And anyway. And they get caught in a storm, a sandstorm. They're going to perhaps die. They offer Alexander, one of the stories, there's a lot of stories about Alexander, and some of them, are they true or not true? Are they exaggerated? Because he's a bit larger than life, right? But one of the stories is, all these guys are out wandering in the desert with Alexander. Everybody's getting real thirsty, and somebody brings a metal helmet filled with water to Alexander to drink. And Alexander takes the helmet and he pours the water out onto the sand. And he says, I'll drink when my men drink. And all the men said, I would have taken the helmet. Well, anyway. No, of course the men think he's a wonderful guy, a hero, which they do. I mean, I guess he kind of is, right? He is a great leader. He does get these guys to do what he wants for a long time through some pretty dangerous and, they're a long ways from home. They stay away from home for years following him, fighting battle after battle. All right, then he moves on back up, retracing his steps. When he gets up past Tyre, he cuts through a place that's probably on the news today, if you guys ever watch the news, Syria. And he goes out through Syria and he makes his way into Mesopotamia. All right. He makes his way there because remember we told you that he had a decision to make when he met the emperor in battle. He could have chased him into the heartland of Mesopotamia. Perhaps he could have captured him. Perhaps he could have defeated him. But he would have had a lot of undone business like Tyre and all the rest of Egypt. And he could have then found himself surrounded, fighting a two-front war. I don't know. Alexander makes the decision, and obviously it works, so most people think it was the right decision. He let the emperor run. That kind of sent a message anyway. The emperor's running. And then he headed down the coast. He solidified his control over the coast of Palestine and Egypt. And then he comes back into Mesopotamia. He meets the emperor once again, Darius III, near Babylon, in a famous battle called Gaugamela. The famous Battle of Gaugamela, where here Alexander overwhelms Darius' forces, and Darius has to flee once again. This is twice he met him directly in battle. Twice he has escaped. Alexander then continues moving into Babylon. He takes the city of Babylon. He moves on south. But along the way, one of Darius's governors, satrap, is what the Persians call them. The satrap, and they divided the way the Persians worked this. They had a huge empire. They divided things into what we might call provinces or regional territories that they called a satrap, and they had a satrapy. The satrapy was like the governor. And so one of these governors found out that Darius was in his territory, and he went to him and he killed him. Then he had the body delivered to Alexander saying, the satrap has killed this guy, your enemy, and he has delivered it. I think he thought it would win favor with Alexander. It did not win favor with Alexander. Alexander took it as an affront, because this is the emperor and you are his governor. You are to serve him. I don't care if he's my enemy. He was your emperor. So it did not win any brownie points for that governor. And Alexander took the body of his enemy and he gave him a burial of honor, as an emperor would have. Because Alexander respected the office, I guess we would say today, he respected the position of an emperor. Yes, it was his enemy. Yes, they were fighting in battle. Yes, he probably would have killed him in battle. But this was not the way this guy should die. See, he was not honorable. So he buried him. And in fact, by the way, he meets one of Darius's daughters. He will later marry her. He will then proceed to carry out his revenge. And he will go down and destroy the capital cities that the Persians had in the southern part of Persia, of Susa, Pasargada, and especially Persepolis, which you see pictured here. Persepolis, he destroys much as the Persians destroyed Athens. This is the procession way, it's called. This top photo. It's hard to make it out here, but all of these are sort of little people, right? Little images of men who are bringing gifts to the emperor. And they would have to do this every year. They would come here in a procession and make a big ceremony out of it. That here is the leader of this territory. Here is the leader of this region. Here is the king of this. And they would all come and they would all bow down before the emperor and they would all bring various gifts. Therefore, the Persian king was called the King of Kings, because even kings had to bow down before him. So this procession way, still partially intact, as you can see. But the city was destroyed. The temples were destroyed. Yes?
When you say that Alexander the Great's military campaign was motivated solely by revenge, or did he have other goals?
Well, sure, he had other goals. It was primarily motivated, at least at the beginning, by revenge. He wanted to pay back the Persians for attacking and destroying Athens and attacking Greece. Now, obviously, he's going to accomplish that. Once he does this, it's definitely accomplished. So you'd say, okay, it's over. And the men kind of thought it ought to be over. But Alexander was not ready for it to be over. There was more of the Persian Empire out there further to the east, and Alexander had the belief that the world ended over that way. He wasn't sure where. His tutor Aristotle had told him that the limits of the world, went to sort of the edge of the Persian Empire, and so he wanted to control the world. And when he marched on to the east, as we're going to show maybe in a minute, he will march on to the east. He will go into what today would be Afghanistan, Iran, Afghanistan, Pakistan, India. He gets to the Himalayas. He thinks for sure this must be the end of the world. This must be the edge of the world. And when he gets up to the top of the Himalaya mountains and he looks out and he sees it just goes on and on and on, I don't know what his feeling was. Disappointment, perhaps, because it was so much bigger than he had expected, and he wanted to keep going. His men did not. So yeah, I think, he's motivated by more than one thing, but certainly revenge is a powerful motivator. And, power, as it went on, he kept winning battle after battle. He kept conquering more and more land. So I think he thought, why should I stop? And he did sort of get the idea that he was special. He was different. He was probably even divine. Because there had been these rumors that he had a special birth, and his, a lot of mothers tell their kids that kind of stuff. But, and that he was specially born for this. His identification with Heracles or Hercules. There's even an incident in his life that takes place here at Mesopotamia, so I guess I'll go ahead and tell you now. Alexander, after Egypt, had gotten into the habit of people addressing him as divinity and bowing down. I mean, not just bowing down, being prostrate on the ground, laying out flat on the ground before him. This custom was never one of the Greeks or the Romans, really, but this was the custom in the East for the Egyptians and others. And Alexander kind of liked it. Now, the thing was, people who didn't really know Alexander, this wasn't a big deal. They were used to bowing down before great leaders. But to his own men, some of which he had grown up with, who had fought many battles with him by his side, they knew Alexander was a great leader. They knew he was a great man, but he was not a god. And they did not want to lay on the ground before him in this fashion. Alexander was also prone to hit the sauce, as I would say. Hit the sauce. And reportedly, at least in a source or two, when he was hitting the sauce pretty hard one night, one of his old friends came in and he got angry with him because he didn't bow down before him. Basically, the guy said, look, Alexander, I'll follow you anywhere, but you're not a god. And Alexander got very angry and actually killed him. Killed him while he was drunk. I think this haunted Alexander later on, if you want me to do some speculation. And I think it changed things. That event changed things for him. Well, let's move on. Here we see, I told you, he's not done. He goes down here. Here's Persepolis way in the south. Here's Susa. There's Gaugamela. So he heads down through the center and he heads down in here and he goes down to the coast and back. And now he decides, he goes to Ecbatana, and now he's going to head out past the mountains. There are mountains here into Iran, into Media, and as it's called, and territories further east. Here is, as though ripped from the pages of National Geographic, actually a center picture. You can see this was a double picture, double page image of the burning of Persepolis. You can see that procession way back here, the temple. The temples have double bull heads, capitals. If you want to see this kind of material from Persepolis, I guess you could go to Iran and Iraq, but maybe you don't want to go there. A little bit closer to home, you could go to the University of Chicago Museum. You could go to the Louvre in Paris. I think they have some in New York. Yes. The site of Persepolis is still there, yes. But, well, the city, I showed you a picture of part of it. Right here is part of it. It's still partially standing. But, he burned it up, and this was his revenge. They're torching it right here. I think that's somewhere near Lakeland. I see all the palm trees. Yes?
You'd think that would be Nero's handiwork.
Be the what?
You'd think that would be the handiwork of Nero.
Nero. Well, Nero.
You weren't told where it was. Looks like Nero would be there. All it's missing is his crappy plank on a roof.
I see. So you're equating it to the burning of Rome. Yeah. Yeah, well, the burning of Rome was done for a different purpose, unless it was accidental.
You're going to accidentally burn the entire city.
Well, you might. Stranger things have happened. I don't know where, but probably somewhere in Lakeland. A lot of strange stuff happens in Florida, I've noticed, since I moved here. I never really noticed before.
Yeah, a lot of mixture of different people.
There's a lot of strange stuff happening. I'm not saying it's bad stuff, I'm just saying it's different. Sometimes being different is okay. Other times it's illegal. Okay. Now he goes on to the east. Bactria, yeah.
Where do you get bacteria from?
I don't think so. But it's a country. It's basically somewhat equivalent to Afghanistan. Okay? Bactria is over that way. It's past Iran and before Pakistan. By the way, I told you that at different times when they wanted to have people cross, that they would cross on boats. This is what I'm imagining. They lash boats together and they make a pathway across. A floating bridge, so to speak. Alexander did this a couple of times. Well, he moves down through the mountains from Bactria. Up in Bactria, he fights the battle against a guy named King Porus. Porus, that means he was filled with little holes. Porus, King Porus. Alexander also kind of meets King Porus's daughter. And they kind of get married too. I think you might get married to her first. Her name is Roxanne, by the way. Yes, everyone knows that song for some reason.
Yep.
Roxanne is her name. It's named after, I'm sure the song was written about her. Roxanne then becomes his bride, but he defeats the king of Porus. In fact, this is the first time that Big Al had faced elephants. He faced elephants in the battle with King Porus, and I think that made an impression on him and his generals and his men. Really big impression if you don't get out of the way. Because, elephants have big feet. All right, never mind. So anyway, we will see that later on, the Greeks, the Hellenistic leaders, will incorporate elephants into their military because they had never faced elephants before. Elephants, by the way, are large, in case you didn't know. And horses do not like elephants. I think horses are used to being the biggest thing on the block. And when they run into something bigger than them, they just don't like it much.
Kind of like people.
Kind of like people. If I run into someone bigger than me, which by the way isn't that often, I do find a little disconcerting because I'm so used to being bigger than other people, taller and bigger, And then all of a sudden, hey, here's some guy that's like, 8 feet tall. Okay, that's taller than me. 8 feet tall. Well, it's got to be about 8 feet to get my attention. Anyway, all right, maybe 7. But anyway, so the elephants also, it turns out horses, once they encounter an elephant, I guess elephants have a particular smell that horses pick up on. And then after that point, if there are even elephants around, horses get nervous, get a little jumpy. They used horses like a platform. They would put a platform up on top of the elephant, and they would have an archer up there shooting down. But they often used them as mainly kind of like a battering ram, sort of like a tank. They would just send the elephant out through the ranks, and everybody's going to get out of the way. It'll break up the formations. Yes.
Called the tandem war elephants.
The what? What kind of elephant?
The tandem war elephants.
The tandem war elephant? I'm not sure about the tandem war elephant. Of what period do we speak? Oh, you just heard the phrase.
I've heard the name associated with what you're saying.
Yeah. Well, they would use them. I've never heard of them lashing them together somehow and like harnessing them together. However, they would use the elephants in concerted movements together to really try to split up people. So a tandem motion, like one elephant going this way, one elephant coming this way, would definitely disrupt the ranks. And that's really what they use them for. Elephants are hard to kill as well. And if you poke them, they just get mad. They have very thick skin. And the only way, now if you ever are encountered, I try to give you helpful hints for survival. If you ever find yourself being pursued by an angry elephant to which you cannot find escape, my first advice would be don't hang out with angry elephants. My second advice would be if you do, stay clear. But if you can't, the most vulnerable part of the elephant is not easy one to access. It's up between the front legs. You take a spear or a gun and you shoot them right in the middle of the chest, going for the little elephant heart. That's about your only bet if you're trying to stop an elephant. If you just like shoot him in the side or something, that just makes him real mad. I don't think it's going to stop him. Maybe days from now might stop him, but probably be too late for you. Anyway, so in battle, when they had to fight elephants, that's actually what they had to do. Somebody had to run forward and kind of almost lay under the elephant and stick up a spear and then hope the elephant just kind of ran into it. So you kind of stick it out there and hold it tight and let the elephant run into it. That could work. But then, of course, you're kind of under the elephant when it falls. And so he just falls on you and kills you. So anyway, the elephant wins in the end. Okay. Now, they take the Indus River Valley. Alexander wants to move on. Oh, does he want to move on? Because he knows there's a lot more of India to take, and he thought the world would end. He wants to keep going until he finds another big ocean or the end of the land. Of course, Alexander doesn't know how far that would be. Go all the way to China to do that. And he may have done it. I don't know. He probably would have run out of supplies or men or something. But he wanted to keep going. His men basically said, you know what, Alexander? We have now been away from home for about 6 years. And we've been pretty much fighting continuously for 5 to 6 years. And we are hundreds of miles, we are thousands of miles from home. We've defeated the Persians. There are no more Persian territories left. Can we go home? Can we take a break? Can we stop? So Alexander, fearing a mutiny, reading his men, said, okay. And so they go back to Babylon, where he and his men marry local women. And Alexander never returns to Greece. He dies in Babylon in 323. He dies of a fever at the age of 33. His death, much like his ascension to power, his death is filled with speculation and filled with intrigue and conspiracy theories that somebody had him killed, somebody poisoned him because there was a big party, a big banquet. Alexander had been hitting the sauce pretty hard. The sauce, yeah. I think it's duck sauce. You've been drinking a lot of duck sauce. You get that down at the Chinese restaurant. It's kind of red color. The duck sauce. What?
Duck sauce is brown.
Not the duck sauce I eat. I'm not talking about that kind of duck sauce. I'm talking about stuff put on egg rolls. It's usually kind of pinkish red, kind of orangey. Sweet.
It's also called plum sauce.
Plum sauce.
Panda Express called plum sauce.
That sounds like food. Panda Express.
Which is making me hungry for some Chinese food. I haven't had any Chinese food in a long time.
I'm having it after school.
Well, anyway, Big Al dies of a fever, surrounded, there's been a lot of speculation. I heard a whole guy give a paper about the death of Alexander, what caused it. I've had students write papers about it. Could well have been appendicitis. He definitely reportedly had a fever, and it took him days to die. So this is why some people don't think it's poison. Usually poison's faster than that. But if he did have a ruptured appendix and then went septus, then you'd have a fever and die slowly, painfully, over a few days. And Alexander leaves no successor. When asked, who should succeed you, Alexander? When it becomes apparent he's probably going to die, he looked around, he said, the strongest. Now, what do you think that's going to lead to? A lot of fighting. He did have a son, a very young son, but not old enough to lead. Now remember, next week, we have the Hitler class on Monday. Well, this class meets on Wednesday, and then on Friday, it's what we like to call Good Friday, so we have no classes. Yes, question?
Couldn't he have died of cirrhosis of the liver?
Cirrhosis of the liver. Well, that's a good, yeah. It's possible. It's possible. I don't think he reportedly had jaundice, though. If you have cirrhosis of the liver, you're definitely going to get jaundice, and that would be easy to tell because your eyeballs turn yellow. You figure somebody would have reported that. Alexander's eyeballs turned yellow.
Turned mine.
So, that's why, I think he drank enough that eventually might have happened to him, but I don't have any reports. None of the descriptions report that, and so you would think that's such an obvious thing somebody would report. Because if you've ever seen anybody with yellow eyeballs, which I have, you can't forget it too easily, okay? All right, on that happy note, we will end for today. I hope you have a great weekend.